Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to the February edition of Molten Music Monthly. Now, of course, all we can really think about is how awesome and powerfully fantastic Synth East was over this past weekend. I mean, is there really anything else to talk about? Well, apparently there is. Apparently a whole load of other stuff came out during the month. I've had my head buried firmly in trying to get this event off the ground and get everything together and everything trucking along, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But first, coming up on this month's monthly, Behringer rustles up a few more minis. Cherry Audio can't go for that. Oh, no can do. IOLabs brings particle physics into your rack. Winterbloom gets salty. Akai lands on the perfectly sized MPC Key. Erica Synths resurrects the Mutant machine. Moog has a good long look in the mirror. Busy Circuits makes a plug-in. Oddment Audio prepares to granulate. Pittsburgh finds some harmonics in the bushes. Feedback Modules pokes around in the Putney. Eowave does interesting things with MIDI. Instruo lets everything pass. Gforce makes an OB-EZ for idiots. Ginkgo Synthes has another go at the Sampleslicer. Expert Sleepers blends 5 LFOs. Nano Module steals from VCV Rack. Hammond packs an organ into 4 octaves. BLL has a go at looking cool with a guitar synth controller thingy. NOH Modular puts a pianist in your rack. And Tiptop Audio finally gets around to releasing art. But first, Synth East. Synth East 2024. What a thing. What a weekend. I am knackered, completely knackered. I've been instructed to take at least 3 days off, which I kind of almost have. In fact, I think we're going to go to lunch after this and just relax for the rest of the afternoon. Oh, and 2 other things happen, of course. But yes, Synth East. What a weekend of synthy modular music making community blending and bonding extraordinariness of film, talk, music, bleeps and bloops, beer and lots of beer. It was great. If you didn't come, you really missed out, because it's a fantastic weekend in Norwich of synthesizer fabulousness. It all seemed to go off, as far as I could tell, without too much of a hitch. We had a really great time. Now I'm going to make a video that highlights the whole thing. There's a walkthrough, there's music, there's performances, all of that's been captured, and I'm currently, as soon as I get myself sort of back into gear, I'm going to grind those together and it will be available on the internet for you to enjoy. But just to say a massive thank you to everyone who came along, all the manufacturers, all the punters, all the people, all the artists, everyone who contributed to make that such a great weekend. Electronic Sound Magazine, the Norwich Art Centre, just superb. It's the pulling together of so many different strands and people and things and enthusiasms and giftings, and generosity on everyone's part in making it just a fun weekend to immerse ourselves in synths and beer and wine and other spirits too. It was a flipping good time, it was. Wow. But I think what just stuns me every time is just what an awesome bunch of people are involved in this business. It's just fantastic. It's really, really, really great. Right, on with the show. Now a bit about Behringer, because they release so much or announce so much stuff and release some of it and announce more stuff and announce more stuff. It's just impossible to keep up. I don't really know where they are anymore. So I don't know. So just there were a couple that I think came out just post NAMM or around NAMM or something like that didn't make it into last month's stuff that I thought, oh well, that's fairly cool. And also I did get a chance to play on one of the minis at Synth East. So I thought, heck, here you are. Behringer don't need me to tell you about their new stuff, because they have a massive fan base of people who are hanging on their every single circuit and will snap it up as soon as it arrives. So, as far as marketing goes, they've got all that sorted out. So they don't really need anything from me to point out to people that these things exist. However, a couple of new ones that came along that I've no idea whether they're available or not, but there are pictures of them, and so let's go with that. The first of all, there's the CZ1 Mini. Now this is based on the classic Casio CZ synthesizer, which is what I wanted when I was a kid. Now, you may have seen that I did a video about my very first synthesizer, which was the DX100, and that's on Matt Wright's music YouTube channel. Do go and check that out. I'm going to do a much larger version. He wanted like 7 minutes. I like talked for hours about this thing, so I'm going to post a larger version about it sometime soon. But I'm only saying this because at the time when I acquired the DX100, which my dad bought, I was actually really wanting the CZ101. The Casio, that's what I wanted. Why? Well, because it was the synthesizer that was in Cook's Music in Norwich when I was a kid, and so really back in those days you bought what was in the music shop, because no internet, there was no marketing other than in magazines that you probably didn't know existed, and so you were very much drawn to what it was that you could find in your local music shop, and it was the CZ stuff that was there. I mean, the CZ, the big one, the 1000, 5000, can't remember, the one that had the sequencer in, which was what I really, really wanted because it had a sequencer, and that seemed to be desperately important. But the CZ101 was the one that was potentially going to be the one you could afford, and it sounded great. I mean, I distinctly remember playing on it in that shop at that time, and the feel of the buttons and almost like the smell of it, and it was amazing. Anyway, Behringer have produced a mini one, CZ1, which apparently has got all of the phase distortion synthesizer type sounds and stuff going on in there. I don't know how much of an interface you're going to have with that, and is that important? I mean, because with these sorts of synthesizers, as we went post-analog into this new realm of DX and CZ and bits and pieces, the interface really fell away. And so the fact that you've got a very small interface on the Behringer one, does that really matter? Is that important? Probably not, because you're just kind of after the sounds. It's like with the Pro VS they've done. You're just really stepping through the presets. That's really what you're after. You're after a sound bank, which is what I think these things serve as being. Of course there's editing. Of course you can get deep into the business. But you just want 200 presets of something that sounds flipping awesome, and you want to plug that in on your desktop and start playing. Perfect. That's what this is and what this can be, and it's £100. Job done, you know. The other one they've done is they've taken the OB-EZ, UB-EZ, the Oberheim that they've just released, the UB-EZ. They've shrunk that down to a mini as well, so you can get essentially access to all the sounds plus a bit of a filter on the top. And again, it's a fabulous way to get that kind of analog sound into your small desktop environment. Perfect, brilliant, absolutely, rock and roll. That's what they should be doing. And apparently there's also a CR78 coming along as well, which is the one of the original Roland drum machines, the one that's on In the Air Tonight, Phil Collins, and I can't go for that, no can't do that track and stuff that I alluded to at the start. So they got one of those coming along as well. Which is that exciting? I don't know. Maybe. Anyway, so lots of boxes coming along from Behringer. Great. Keep them coming. They are definitely filling a hole in the market for cheap synthesizers, and it's all good, you know. It's all good most of the time. Talking of which, the CR78 Cherry Audio have just released a virtual version of it, an emulated version of part of their software range. It's the first drum machine I think Cherry Audio have done, which is cool, and it is based on that CR78, the Roland. The one, as I just mentioned, was in the Air Tonight, and other famous tracks. Blondie used it apparently, very famously. It doesn't really thrill me particularly. That sound, those bossa novas and those claves going through stuff. Yeah, it's all right for those classic sounds. I mean, the thing with the software version, of course, is that you've got modulation pages and editing that you could never have done on the original thing, with pitch changes and tone changes, all that sort of stuff, modulation, effects, all the wizardry that you could possibly imagine stuffed into a software interface of a drum machine that looked like an old box of bits. But Cool, yeah. I mean, I like the idea of a real one with those real pushy buttons, those sort of radio type buttons, that kind of thing. In software, I think something is evidently lost in the interface because it becomes superfluous, really, because you're controlling it in other ways, and it becomes a mouse exercise, which is interesting. I mean, the sound quality and the circuits, it's not sample based, this is all based on modelling of circuits, so it's going to give quite an interesting dynamic sound, I think. So yeah, cool. If that's your sort of thing, that's the way in. IOLabs are bringing something physical. Something physical in terms of physics and particles, the bombardment of stuff under gravity and under forces, the rejection, the reboundness, the collision, all that sort of stuff stuffed into Eurorack, so you can extract the movement, the modulation, the occurrences, and stick it into Movie Filter, that sort of thing. So Particles is a Eurorack module. It's got a touch screen. It's a physics simulator. It looks totally crazy, totally bonkers. It's on Kickstarter at the moment. They're hoping to raise a whole bunch of money to bring it into existence, to force it into the physical realm, which is an exciting time. You can set up all sorts of portals, black holes, gravity wells. You can, fire things over here, drop things down here, and make things slide about the place. Exactly how you pull those things into your rack, it's quite interesting. It's very ordered. Of course, the screen takes center stage, and you can use it like a pinball machine. You can play snooker on it. I'm sure it's probably got a Space Invaders alternative firmware. And in some ways, we've seen something similar with this with the Korg Modwave, with the physics chaos thing that you use, and you can push stuff around and flick things about the place. That's kind of the idea, but this is immense. I mean, you can have up to 50 particles interacting with each other. As I say, black holes, portals, surfaces, things either passing through or reflecting and going in other directions. And then along the top, we've got this massive CV outputs, presumably, that you pull from various parameters. It sounds like the way they describe it is that you've got to set up a simulation that you then fire off to happen, which sounds a little bit of a complicated way of doing things rather than just getting your fingers involved and going. But maybe you can do that too. Maybe the point, I imagine, is that there's going to be a whole bunch of preset environments or simulations there which you can then interact with, so you don't have to dream up a new way of doing physics every time you turn it on. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of stuff going on in this thing. I mean, crikey, you could probably pull out all sorts of stuff. So much data is being generated that I don't even know what you're going to plug it into. Is it going to be running drums? Is it going to be running modulation? Is it simply going to be firing out an enormous amount of gates based on this idea of things bouncing around and being pulled by gravity? It's quite fascinating, really. I think it's the sort of thing you could get deeply into. I just wonder that there's so much of it that will all of your carefully curated simulations actually produce different results, or will it just be this sense of kind of marbles and randomness and cascading feels and grooves all coming out of the end in a similar sort of way? It'll be really interesting to see, because I mean, some of the videos I've watched essentially just kind of give a bit of an overview, and you're not always clear exactly what is affecting what. So a fascinating module, I think. Needs a little bit of time and thought and poking around inside. But it was successful on Kickstarter. It has been brought to life. And delivery is estimated to be in July. So I wonder when we'll first start seeing them appear. So out of the purpleness of Winterbloom comes Neptune. Neptune is a filter built in collaboration with Decapod, or Carson Walls from Decapod. And it is... what a filter, isn't it? It's filters, good looking filter, lovely filter. It's called Neptune. It has a dial on it that says Salt, which is very interesting. Right, so what's it all about? Well, Neptune is a diode filter, 4-pole diode filter, low pass and high pass, but it has this interesting way of combining those two together. You have separate inputs for low pass and high pass, but only a single output. So they are blended and mixed together if that's what you want. And then you have this feedback salt driven overdrive knob that pushes in the chaos and the weirdness. This is not like a silky, smooth, gorgeous, gooey filter. This is something slightly different. It's more unpredictable, more unstable, with instability at its core, pulling together this chaos of salt-shaken, undersea world, I suppose. I mean, Neptune, is that... Are we talking about the sea? Are we talking about space? Oh, because there's salt. Is it space? No, is it... I don't know. It's kind of a spacey, salty, ocean-filled, cosmic vibe. That's what they're going for. It certainly looks great, and I've bought myself a kit, so hopefully I'll get a chance to build one and try it out pretty soon. If you've been keeping up with the world of the Akai MPC, you'll know that they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some of them have stuff in it, some of it doesn't have stuff in it, some of it's just a controller. Other things are packed full of gigabytes of samples and stuff. I was told recently in a comment on something I did on Modular that all I really need is an Akai MPC key. That's what I need. I don't need anything else. That would run my whole show, and I should get rid of all this analog rubbish, all this kind of stuff, and just have an MPC, man. That's all you want, an MPC. You don't need anything else. It will run everything. It will run your modular. It will run the lot. And you can have all this stuff in it. All this stuff. It generates sounds and awesomeness. Yeah. No, I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does. It just may not necessarily be my scene, but there are all sorts of scenes out there for all sorts of people. And why should one restrict oneself to one way of thinking about things? So anyway, Akai have produced a kind of a compact 37 keyed version of their MPC key. I mean, it is in some ways, I mean, it's not the pinnacle of what MPC is about, because that was in the past, but you have to think about where it goes forward and how it goes forward. And I think what Akai have done is that they've created this ecosystem for themselves in which you can literally control everything and make music and produce entirely on this device, while also feeding in and being connected to external bits and pieces as well. So they're doing a bloody good job. I mean, if that's your workflow, if you like that paddy thing, with the introduction of keys, if that's the way you like to work with a relatively small, color screen guiding the way, then it is a great step away from the computer. It is the way that you can take something of that size. I mean, I really like the 37 keyed sort of size keyboard. It's enough, It's enough. I mean, it's full size keys as well. And it's the sort of thing you can sit on your kitchen table and play. You're not having to take up a massive amount of space like you do in a Yamaha Montage or even the larger MPC. This is cute. This is compact. This is reasonable. You can sit down with it on your lap on the train and actually make music, or in the park. I mean, potentially, assuming is it battery powered? I have no idea. You can go and look that up. But as a device, the form factor I think is really good, and the software and the door behind it is all starting to mature now. So it does have and can do pretty much everything. Eric Synths have brought another Hexinverter module back. This is the Mutant machine. This is, it's another one of those kind of linear drum percussion modules that is designed to create every sort of twisted electronic percussion that you could possibly imagine in the one thing. It has these two sections. It's got a membrane section and a snappy section. You've got which is like kick drums and snares, and in the middle you've got weirdness. You've got like a modulation panel which scans through waveforms and changes the sound, but ultimately you're just sticking one trigger in. Sticking a trigger in like you are with other things we've played with recently, like the knob technology SGR or the Persimmon Alteratus Alter or the Wobbler. You stick a single trigger in that's triggering, and then you change the sound around it in order to produce the kicks, the snares, the hi-hats, the bits and pieces around it. I mean, the Mutant machine has been doing this for a decade, I think. It's quite an old module, but it's still absolutely holding its own. I mean, I've got one, I've been playing with it a bit, going, cool, crikey. There's a lot of stuff in here to think about, but it gives you these two places to play, and then this place which messes it all about. It's quite interesting. It's a big module. You know, you've got to be serious about your percussion if that's what you're into. Apparently it's all based on the TR-909 kick and snare circuits, which is interesting, but bent to heck. And all of it is thoroughly discreet. I don't mean discreet as in it's kind of gentle and won't tell on you when you do bad things in the background. No, it will shout about that. Heck, no, I mean discrete components. So it's analog through and through, and will sound extraordinary in the right pair of hands. This is a crazy thing. Over the Super Bowl, that big football-y thing they have in America land, they had a halftime show with some geezer jumping around, having a bit of a sing. Alicia Keys was there, I noticed. It was great. It was a fantastic show, funnily enough, an amazing and a stunning performance. But within it all, within Usher's amazing halftime show, was a band. And it was a band made up of, as far as I could tell, completely Moog synthesizers. Now, were they playing the music? You know, who cares? Who cares? But you had this massive bank of synthesizers on the edge of the stage. And apparently, somebody said, oh, look, there's one there that I don't recognize. Now, the one that they were pointing at the whole time, to me, looked absolutely like a Jupiter X from Roland, but obviously that's not a Moog. But apparently, no, it was something we haven't seen before. Curious. I mean, it was gone in a second. I mean, you didn't really see it. I guess people must be watching it on digital TV and then rewinding it and rewatching and going, oh, look, there's a synthesizer that's just a slightly different layout to all the rest that we haven't seen before. Extraordinary. You people out there are amazing. Absolutely amazing. But anyway, as it happens, Andrew Wang has one of these, and he posted a picture of it going, oh, look, it's a new Moog that you don't know anything about. I'm going to give you most of a picture of it and then say nothing more other than to say it's a thing. And that was stunning. I mean, either that's an extraordinary leak or he was asked to do that or told that he could to generate a bit of interest around what we saw at the Super Bowl show. But so what do we know? Oh, we know nothing. We know nothing. We think it's probably polyphonic. We think it's got a couple of oscillators. We think it's called Mirror. So I think the general consensus is that it's based on the Matriarch. Fabulous piece of Moog technology. But it's based on that sort of engine, but with more polyphony and with a user interface that's less modular and more straightforward synthesizer. So for me, I think if Moog can pitch a polyphonic synthesizer in the sort of area where you find things like the Arturia Polybrute and stuff like that, that would be quite a thing. Because, you know, Moog tends to float around. You've got the reasonably priced stuff with the Mother 32 and then the Grandmother and the Matriarch. Those sort of float around in things which are relatively accessible. And then it just leaps massively up to the Moog 1. Where, you know, there's no way I'm affording that behemoth. So something that sits in the middle, something which is a bit easier. Not that the Moog 1 is not usable and easy. It is, but it's also quite an intense synthesizer, I think. Whereas something which is more like an Oberheim or a Prophet, something that sits in a more of a creative synthesizer sounding kind of space, that's a bit more accessible to people. I think that could be an awesome thing for Moog. Moog, of course, are now run by a company called InMusic, but this synthesizer must have been well underway well before InMusic took charge. And it's a very positive thing to see that Moog might be putting out a new, interesting instrument. ALM Busy Circuits have produced a plugin. This is unexpected and unusual. It's a FM synthesizer called, what's it called? Motto Akemie? Motto Akemie. Anyway, it's 6-voice FM plugin that has 6 identical sound engines, 6 of them in a row, and a sequencer at the bottom, a trigger sequencer at the bottom, and every parameter has its own lane, and so you can create these evolving and ever-changing patterns of FM synthesis-ness. It's cool. It's quite interesting. I mean, at the same time, it's quite basic. I don't think you can drag patterns out or anything like that. It just has to run as a plugin in your DAW, and it does very much its own thing. It takes, I think, all of its ideas from the Takeo module, their drum percussion module, which gives you 2 operator voices and wavetables and stuff. And it'll do regular FM as well as just the blending of those two sound sources together. So there's lots and lots of tonal possibilities within this little thing. And it's just awesome to see a company like ALM Busy Circuits move into plugins. That's very interesting. This is a neat looking thing called the Groc from Oddment Audio. Good name as well, quite like that. But it looks like it's got like a phone set into a desktop of knobs, which is nice. I'm finding the orientation of that screen quite jaunty as opposed to the regular landscape that we've come to get bored by. This is quite a cool thing. What is it? Well, it's a granulizer. Of course it is. It's a massive granulizer system that attempts to pull out as many parameters as possible and set them in front of you so that you can finger about them without having to worry about your brain falling out. Gosh, the website really is a bit dense. It is packed full of information. Maybe it's the sort of thing you should go and check out yourself, because I don't know that I've got time to absorb all of this right at the moment, but I can tell you that it's got over 12 simultaneous voices, that all of the knobs on the top have an A and a B sort of system, so you've got twice the control under a kind of a shift system that's going to get you to all of the most common granular parameters. You've got filtering and binaural spatialization at granular level. It's very exciting. And it has 16 modulation sources, hundreds of destinations. It's an epic thing that really from the front it looks relatively calm, but I get the feeling that there's a lot of stuff going on behind the panel. Granular, of course, is always down to your source material on how interesting it becomes. So it all kind of depends on what you pump into it, I suppose. But it's a nice looking box. Apparently they're aiming for the end of the year, but they should be at Superbooth, and hopefully we can find out a bit more. Pittsburgh Modular are on safari again. This time they've visited the local parks. Maybe to throw a ball around. Who knows? Let's hope it's something like that. So what is this? Well, this is a harmonic oscillator. It's an analog oscillator that tries to make the most of everything they've learnt about bending stuff so far. So the idea of taking simple waveforms and just manipulating and bending them to produce more interesting things, to introduce harmonics and overtones and other bits of crap that get associated with once you start messing with the nice curvy angles of waveforms. In local parks you can use pulse width modulation, so you can shift the waveform about, but then it's also got pulse shift, which does similar things but in a slightly different direction. And both of these things produce a chewiness of extra harmonics. And the thing that's pushing them about, so the modulation source can also be sine wave, can be square wave, can be sawtooth, so you can create different timbres depending on how that shift is occurring. They've also built in something called the blade wave, which is a sawtooth wave that flips itself up an octave and somehow shifts back again, creating kind of this pulsing chorusing effect. And then at the bottom of the thing you've got some kind of logic going on which is going to combine, I don't know, whatever it is that's coming through it through some form of logic key, Andy, oring or something, blending and stuff. Richard did a very long video on it. As you can see, I'm still a bit zapped from Synth East, so I'm not completely focused on everything that's going on. But hopefully I'm pointing you in the right direction for a few things. So go and check out Richard's video. He'll tell you all about it. He goes into immense detail. And it's a great looking, I love the flowers and the front end, gorgeous. And it's another way of finding interesting waveforms within the analog arena of your good old voltage controlled oscillator. Meanwhile, over at Feedback Modules, they've had a poke around inside the Putney. Yes, this is the VCZIII EMS, you know, the Putney synthesizer, a classic VCZIII fella. What am I talking about? Oh, I don't know. So anyway, so they've had a poke around in there and they've pulled out the oscillators. Now, apparently the oscillators in the Putney are all a bit kind of weird and not all really completely together. And so Feedback Modules have taken that lack of togetherness and are celebrating it within a module which is exactly that oscillator. And interestingly, they've done two versions. They've done like a standard and a precision version. And the precision version uses a different sort of knob, allowing you to really get into that fine tuning like you had on the original, which is quite interesting. I wonder whether, I mean, it must be required. It just makes you wonder, why have both? Why not just go for one? What would be the advantage or disadvantage of having one or the other? Which is interesting. There's also, as well as being two versions of the same one, there's also two versions of the oscillator itself, because they have one of them which is based upon the VCO1, and the other one is based upon VCO2/3, because it had 3 oscillators and 2 and 3 were similar. Because they got different wave shapes in them, I think, and therefore they are slightly different. So you have these two very similar but different oscillators in two very similar but different versions. What is going on? I mean, what I love about that is the immense interest in the details, in really getting down to what it is that's important about these oscillators and bringing that out and being unafraid to say, look, these are different enough to make them two entirely different things. I also love the colouring. Is it orange and green in the background around the oscillator? I think it's visually stunning. I really, really like that. The other thing that Feedback Modular have released recently is a sort of a wave shaping LFO. Simple, relatively cheap, but with lots of different waveforms inside. And Eowave have released a Portal. Portal? Is that just like messing around with Portal? I don't know. It's a MIDI to CV module. Now, these are not particularly fascinating, I have to say, but as it goes, as MIDI to CV goes, it's quite interesting. It is. So it's a single module with lots of CV outputs, 8, I think it is in total. Yeah, and it's got MIDI, TRS, and USB on the front. You can plug in a controller, and it will essentially suck out all of your MIDI and turn that into CV, so you can play polyphonically through your thing, or you can just send single things through, whatever you like. What I quite like about it is it's very compact. It's got a lot of outputs, so potentially polyphony or for multi-track from your DAW or in various different ways. It does give an easy way in. I mean, I've done a lot of work. I've worked really hard on the whole DC coupled AC coupled thing, trying to pull CV out of your computer, when honestly, in many ways, it's just too much trouble. And actually having MIDI to CV conversion in a module is just a much simpler way to really achieve the same thing. Of course, you're not getting the full fat range of every single infinite analog waveness, because it's MIDI. But for the majority of cases, particularly if you're using notes or simple modulations, then it ain't going to matter. It really isn't going to matter. But what was also great about the Portal is that through a web interface, you can connect to it and create all sorts of things. It can generate gates, it can generate LFOs, all within itself, which is all pretty cool. It's got some nice lights on it, it's laid out very well. I really should. It's something that I keep meaning to get into at some point. I must do that. So maybe this is the one. Instruo have a new filter. It's called the DAPF. And I think Jason says it's not even a Gaelic word, it's just stands for double all-pass filter. Dual all-pass filter even. Yes, this is an all-pass filter. All-pass filter? What are we going to be filtering now, for heaven's sake? Is it another mode of filter that I haven't thought about? Yeah, kind of. Essentially what it is, I don't know what it is, but there's 2 of them, right? And you've got a slider. I think what it does is it's a phase shifter. An all-pass filter. All-pass filters apparently appear in all sorts of things, and the idea is that it passes everything, but evidently it does something to a signal within that. It's used to do something. It must be used to do something. Anyway, you can use them to phase shift, and so essentially it's a phasing effect. And it can also shift things in a stereo field, sort of, psychoacoustic stereo enhancement kind of way, Doppler effect, things like that. Lots of weird stuff. I mean, Jason's done a massive video telling you all about it. And it's in a little sort of unassuming little module, and it makes you wonder what else they're going to find. They go on these little journeys of investigating an idea, and then are able to bring that idea so creatively and so beautifully into a hardware device that allows you to change and push and alter and add flavour and character to your work. Instruo are just simply the most amazing bunch of people. Now, Gforce software make amazing stuff, and since they've been completely hugged and enveloped by Oberheim, their synths are just extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. Now, the 8 voice is one of my favourite ones. We've got 8 SEMs, synthesizer modules, that you can program. Well, I mean, on the original, essentially program them completely individually and hope that they all hang together. In the software version, you can sort of tie them up a bit more. That makes that a little bit simpler. But it's still quite a baffling and overwhelming interface when you just wanted to get a little tweak to a sound out of it. It takes a lot of effort to do that. And so Gforce have thought, hey, you know what? We could make a version that's essentially like a simple little synthesizer that you can play, so that you can enjoy the entire engine of all those 8 voices of gorgeous Oberheim synthesizer-ness, but in a very simple, stripped down interface. And so they have. It's called the OB-EZ. Oh, it's the OB-EZ. I didn't actually realise that until I spoke it out loud. Because it's based on the OBE, which is the 8 voice, but it's the OB-EZ. See, that's genius. So as I say, it's an 8 voice for idiots, really, which just means that you can load it up, you can play the sounds, you can do little tweaks, a couple of effects boxes on top. Gorgeous, beautiful. Who would want to mess around and all that other stuff when you could just have these perfectly honed, gorgeous presets, tweakable and adjustable, right at your fingertips, ready to be dropped into your projects? Yeah, nice. Ginkgo Synth East is having another go at the Sampleslicer. Sampleslicer is a great Durac module into which you sample something, drop something in, sample it, it then appears across 16 LEDs, and then you modulate the heck out of it to move things about within that sample, or to scan through it, or scan back, or just resequence it, and that stuff. It's a lot of fun, it's a lot of hands-on. This is version 3, and I'm just about to find out what it is that's different. I think the differences are that it's stereo, essentially, and also you can load your own samples directly into it through a little SD card. So it doesn't just have to be about sampling on the fly, although that is one of the things that's particularly great about the Sampleslicer, is that you plug stuff in and just grab stuff on the go and start messing it about. That's the thing that I really liked about it. Or you can plug a little mic in and just go straight in, and it's doing its thing, and it's sequencing this stuff about. But I think he's right for a Mark III to evolve it further, to allow people just to drop in their own samples, so it doesn't have to be right there just at that moment in time, that you can plan a little bit. I think that's no bad thing. Also, I think the converters have been upgraded a bit, so while you can still achieve that 12-bit classic sound through the flick of a switch, it could also be a little bit cleaner and brighter and more, I don't know, what is more what? Sampley? More coolness, more niceness, less bitty. Anyway, the Sampleslicer Mark III is on Indiegogo, and he's looking for funding in order to make the first batch. So it's really sort of looking for interest. If you're interested in that sort of thing, then go and pledge some money, because it will be great to see the Mark III come into being, and for the Sampleslicer to really become everything it's meant to be. Xbox Sleepers have a new module in their analog range. This is called the Otterley. Now, this is a 5 LFO module, and it's completely fascinating. You should go and watch DivKid Ben's video on it as soon as this is finished, because, I mean, it has some similarities to DivKid's Oct, but it also doesn't. It also has a different thought process behind it. So the idea is that you've got these 4 LFOs to start with. 5th one's like a bonus, it's an extra one. Don't worry about that one, that just runs all by itself. Forget about that one, it's just there for a bit of fun. So the 4 main LFOs are just slightly out of sync with each other. They drift. So they start perhaps at the same place. In fact, if you reset it, it's got a reset input, you reset it, they all start together. And then they just slowly drift apart. And it has this marvellous effect within your system, like the Oct does to some degree. You pump the Oct into things, everything's moving slightly differently, and that's rather wonderful. But with the Otterley, you start off almost together, and then it starts to drift, and you have this ability to spread them apart, so they become either more in sync or less in sync, depending on which way you turn it. And that, of course, can be modulated. You can also mix them together to create weird waveforms. There's sine and square wave options, and it's just that beauty of not being tied to time, of uncoupling yourself from synchronization and letting it go. It's one of those weird things, because with LFOs, sometimes when I get a synced LFO, it's like, oh, that's perfect, that's just what I needed. If only flipping could sync things more often, then that would be great, and it works perfectly. And there's other times, like when using the Oct, that it's just doing its own thing, and that has a beauty to it. In fact, there's something about it that reminds me of that I'm going to forget now, of that ADAC floaty thing that I think I talked about last month. We've got these buoys on an ocean, and it's moving like that, and they have this relation to each other, although they're moving along differently. So that kind of idea is what it creates. This, it's not a seasick feeling, it's more of just this gentle pulsing of things falling further and further apart. It's really, really fascinating. Like it a lot. Great deal. Like it a great deal. I also should point out that it is, I think, if it's not now, then it soon will be, the 10-year anniversary of the Disting, which is quite exciting. And so I was talking to Oz over the weekend from Expert Sleepers, and I think I might have promised to do something on it. Now, as you may know, I almost famously have a love-hate relationship with the Disting, because it's fabulously featured, fabulously useful, and fabulously difficult to get into, to penetrate. So, but, I think it would be really good for me to go back to it and have a look and see if I can pick out some of the things that really, really work well for me. Or perhaps I should just learn the thing a bit better. I think that would be interesting. But anyway, another fantastically interesting and creative module out of Expert Sleepers. I mean, the whole analog range have not been like, wow, and crazy. They've just been thoughtful, is what I like about them. The envelopes have been really great. The LFOs and other bits and pieces, they've just been nicely thought of. That really reflects, I think, the music that Oz makes as well, which is immensely thoughtful. And so this is great stuff. I should do more on Expert Sleepers, and I fear that I will. Do I have this one? No, it's in my other rack. Oh, it's in my other rack. So it's just over there, still in a bag. I can't be bothered to get that out now. Anyway, Nano modules have taken something from VCV Rack. This is kind of unexpected. A lot of hardware modules do software versions of themselves in VCV Rack. This is going the other way. This is taking one of the original VCV Rack modules called Random, one of the stock ones you get with the free version, and making it appear in hardware, which is quite interesting. I'm doing a proper review of it, so I'm still just trying to get into it, but the idea is that it's a module that produces 4 flavors of the same randomized output, using rate, probability, randomness, as in how close and far apart it was to the last value, and also how smooth it is between each one. It's interesting. I'm just looking into the best ways to use it and to how to best demonstrate it, but it's an interesting move to go from software into hardware, and I wonder whether it's a sign of things to come. There's a new keyboard from Hammond. Yes, Hammond, those people who make organs. This is the M-Solo. It's quite a compact sort of carryable, because I mean, Hammond organs are not renowned for their ability to be carried single-handedly. They're the sort of things that get winched down out of a lorry and like having to be wheeled by several people into the building. So this is nice. This is a 49 key instrument. It's got a few drawbars on it. It has those classic Hammond sounds built in, and it's absolutely light enough to put under your arm and take to a gig. It's got 49 note polyphony, so that's polyphony for every key, so full polyphony against the thing. You've got your tone wheel sounds, you've got some string sounds, you've got some analog moduling, got some analog moduling synthesizer sounds, and sounds from Vox, Far, Fissure, and Acetone as well. A lot of stuff built in. I mean, if you're after an organ that's small, portable, then this is the thing. I think for me personally, if they just crammed in a nice electric piano, then it would be a goer. The BLL Instruments Elyra. The BLL Instruments Elyra, I think it is. Now this has got me thinking. This is an interesting exercise in design and functionality and what the heck are you doing kind of vibe. It's a synthesizer, it's a controller, it has a really interesting interface which fills me both with kind of joy and interest and also horror. I can't quite decide. My brain can't quite work out whether this is a terrible idea or just a genius idea. And that's, I don't know. Let me try to explain. It's a rectangular shaped device, which is wooden around the bottom, which is nice, and then this sort of white surface, which is odd. But within this white surface are all these raised sort of areas, and to one side you've got like a fretboard, and then you've got some places where you can strum. Two different places you can strum. One which is more of a bass type, so you're strumming with your thumb. Another one where you're doing a proper strum. Maybe it's a bit of an omnichord influence in there. Possibly, but the idea is that it's a controller that you can use strapped to you round your neck like a poser, using the guitar neck kind of approach, and then I feel ridiculous sort of talking about it, but I can see that in here somewhere is some kind of beautiful controller which is going to give you a playable string type experience over your synthesizers. But also it's got a massive synthesizer engine built in, which is quite interesting. Polyphonic, all sorts of things going on, so you can really create some extraordinary sounds. I think you can also put it on your desktop and just play it like this. It has little pads which sit like frets and strings where you place your fingers and then strum in order to create the sound. So yeah, I mean, it's both, as I say, it's both beautiful and disturbing. It's both gorgeous and worrying. I mean, they do this demo on the Kickstarter page of an example of how you change the filter, because the interface is so easy. It's a really easy interface. You're going, okay, change the filter, and the guy's playing a little bass line, and then he has to touch a thing, and then there's a flat, there's no knobs on this, it's a flat touchpad thing. It goes like this, and he's dialing up a number on the screen. You can see on the screen the dial. That's the filter going. He goes the other way. Once I go to the resonance, another button, and then back again. And I'm thinking, that's the worst access to a filter I have ever seen. What are you doing? I mean, the thing with a filter is that you grab it and turn it. I mean, at the very least, it should be mapped. I mean, there are other controls on this thing. There's a couple of just straightforward strip controls. I mean, that's where your filter wants to be. You just want to push into it like a modulation wheel. Don't you? You're trying to demonstrate how easy this thing is to use by highlighting a terrible bit of functionality. But let's not get distracted by that, because overall this is a fascinating and intriguing device. And the fact that it's an entire synthesizer in itself, built by Kimono, I think it is, the people who made another synth whose name escapes me, but it's a virtual analog, I think 16 voice with FM stuff stuck inside, so a lot of great sounds potentially, and an interesting interface. I mean, I really like the fretboard thing on that other controller I can't remember the name of, which was all rubbery, that I had. I did a video on it and everything. Fantastic. I liked all of that. No, the name is just here somewhere. I can't quite put it into my brain. Doesn't matter. So I'm into the idea of different interfaces and interesting ways to connect with what you're doing. It's just looking at it, it looks a bit odd. I wish it was more visually appealing. I mean, it's going to appeal to some people, certainly, because of its cleanliness is quite awesome. But it's also seemingly featureless. And it looks weird strapped to you. If it had a bit more of a guitar shape, yeah, but then is that cheesy? I don't know. I don't know, really. So, you know, I'm just trying to project my honest thoughts on this thing. It could be awesome. I don't know how I feel about it yet. This was an interesting find from a couple of weeks ago, the NOH Modular Pianist. It's a beautifully filmed, I think it's a rendered video, but really nicely done. And what is it about? Well, it's a chord generating playing machine which can create complicatedly voiced chordal sequences. Something along those lines. You sort of dial in the kind of chord voices that you want, and then it generates sequences from that. It has actually 8 CV outputs, which you can double up as note and gate information in order to drive a polyphonic synthesizer or different voices within your rack. It's packed full of chords of various flavours and different colours, and you can sequence those in an ever-changing, evolving kind of way. There's a lot of cleverness going on inside about how it voices these chords and the way that it works that I found very intriguing. They're hopefully, with a bit of luck, sending me one for me to have a bit of a look at, because from the video I couldn't totally grasp exactly what's happening, but it just looked, well, as everything does, it looks so fascinating, it's unbelievable. It has a little screen, it has a little joystick, which I'm not sure about that for accessing and moving things about. So the interface may be a challenge. We're going to see. But it was producing some beautiful sounds, or running some beautiful sounds. And it has elements of the chord pilot about it, I suppose. It also has randomization and probability about the nature of things and where things are going to, which chords it's going to next, that sort of thing. And it could get very interesting. It's also interesting that it doesn't have a MIDI out, at least as far as I can tell. It is resolutely CV, which is either a missed opportunity or a push into producing more interestingly voiced stuff within your rack. Because there are a few MIDI enabled modules now, like the Oxycoral or the Polycinematic. So having MIDI is not necessarily a strange thing to have in your rack. So I don't know, but I'm really looking forward to giving it a go. And finally, Tiptop Audio, it seems, has now released the ART. The ART is now out there. There's a range, half a dozen modules, I think. Just the basics, really, to get us started. And that's important because it's a bit of a mind bend as to what on earth is going on. Have I got it? Have I grasped it yet? Well, I think so. I think so partially. So, what is it? Can I encapsulate it in one go? Let me give it a go. So, ART is the idea of introducing a deeper level of control to your Euro rack. So you have the Octopus module, I think it is to start with, that is your USB MIDI DAW controller. So that's the interface from your let's say from your keyboard. Let's go with that. Let's go with from your keyboard into that. And then it has lots of different ART outputs, and each one of those ART outputs is actually kind of a very fast serial data connection. It uses a regular patch cable, so we're going to be as confused as heck without feeling that we're somewhere different. And you take that and you plug it into an ART oscillator, monophonic oscillator, and it will take single notes from whatever you're playing, and it will put it into your oscillator. Great, so far so 1 volt per octave CV. But it also takes gate information. So you've not just got the pitch information, you've also got gate information. So the on and offness. So it's not just shifting the pitch about the place, it's actually playing it. But if you were to take that same cable and plug it into a polyphonic module, ART module, it would play multiple notes. So it can take all of your notes all at once. So down that same cable you are getting single notes and multiple notes. I wonder how the monophonic oscillator decides which note to play. Maybe it's just on whatever happens next. I don't know. That's going to be interesting to look into. So it can carry polyphonic information as well as monophonic information down this same single regular patch cable. I mean, when it has gate information, I wonder what then happens to the envelope. Does it mean it has like a built-in VCA that's being opened and shut? In which case, how does that relate? I don't know. There's still bits I don't really know. But the basics is simply that. It can take a monophonic signal or a polyphonic signal and plug it into a monophonic or polyphonic oscillator and play it from a keyboard just as you would with CV or just as you would with MIDI, but is doing it at a very high resolution and a way that's also able to keep everything in tune correctly, and that also contains more than just the pitch information. It contains gate and I guess potentially other information as well. The other module that they've released is one they're calling a quantizer, which is an unfortunate name, I think, because what it's doing is taking CV and converting that into art. And I don't think we need to call that a quantizer, to be honest, because we already have things which are called that, which are kind of doing other things. So I think that's an unfortunate naming, but hey, never mind. So you've got 4 channels, you can stick CV into it and that'll convert that into art that you can then zoom around your art modules. Why would you do that? I don't really know. Help us, somebody. So yeah, Tiptop ART, still confusing, slowly revealing. It'll be really interesting to get someone to give it a go who's not just from Tiptop doing a demo, but someone who actually is going to poke around and say, "This, I'm not sure that this really does what I think it does," or actually this is what it does do what it think it does, and answers all the questions that we all seem to have that Tiptop seem completely unaware of. So Tiptop, if you're out there, I'd love to give it a go. Send me a box of the stuff and I will fudge my way through so that everybody can understand at my sort of level what the heck it's all about. Because it continues to look gorgeous and continues to be fascinating. Right, that'll do, I think. That's enough. That's enough for me. I'm still worn out, so that's plenty. What's coming up? Loads. I've got lots of fantastic ideas, and I'm actually been recently trying to engineer the time and space for me to actually achieve some of these things, which is terribly exciting for everyone, as you can imagine. But so coming up very soon, I have a whole mass of DIY. I've had a brainwave this morning about how it is I'm going to work through all the DIY I've got to do. So I think I might. Let's talk about this. We're going to talk about this on Sunday in the live stream. So a live stream this weekend, this Sunday, whatever date that is, I'm not entirely sure. But let's do that. But what we can talk about this as an idea is that perhaps what I need to do is just live stream all of my soldering. Because currently I'm making DIY videos where I film the whole thing on a couple of cameras and I do the whole thing, and then I get editing and I condense it down and do swaps between cameras and then do speed it up bits, and so I can get the build down to some kind of reasonable time. And that's a good thing to be able to do, but it takes forever. There's so much editing involved, so much time. Just purely the time of going back through the whole thing in order to break it down means I have to do the thing twice, at the very least, if you see what I mean. So if it's a 2-hour build, it's at least a 4-hour edit. So that's not right, but something along those lines. It takes a lot of time. So perhaps if I live stream them, warts and all, they would be long, but they would be there and done. And people can skip through the video if they need to. And maybe that's a way that I can actually get through a lot of the kits, because I have, unfortunately, quite a backlog of wonderful things that I want to build. I've got the oscillator there, I've got a big chunky thing over there, I've got the plinky down there, I've got that Neptune coming along, I've got stuff over there, lots of great stuff that I'd like to do, and maybe that's the way forward. Anyway, enough about all that. Come and join us on Sunday night, 8 o'clock. We'll have a chin wag, we'll talk about Synth East, we'll talk about future plans going forwards, because I'm very happily making some positive changes, which I hope is going to open up a new dawn of multimedia technology and the sort of things that I'm doing. So that's very exciting. Looking forward to that. So yeah, come along. We'll have a chat. We'll have a chin wag. That'd be great. Drink some beer. Fabulous. Let's do all that. That's enough then. So I hope that was useful. And in the meantime, go make some tunes.